Have you ever imagined seeing ghosts on a road? I'm a truck driver and I'm going to tell you what happened to me one day at work. We, truck drivers, are always on the road to make deliveries, and we often end up getting involved in accidents where something happens to the truck. But this time, something scary happened to me. I'm a 43-year-old man and I don't consider myself fearful. To be honest, I've faced everything in this life, except that. Here begins the worst working day of my life. It was a Tuesday. My boss called me and said I needed to make a delivery to a city that, honestly, wasn't that far away. I ended up being happy because I would be going home early, at least that's what I thought. I went to the company to load the truck, and my boss asked me to be careful. He told a story about the road I would take. The story was about a spirit that stays on the side of the road and, if you stopped, it would come and hurt you or even make you disappear. I laughed and said it wasn't even Halloween for him to try to scare me. He said that I might not believe it, but that I should be careful and not stop on the side of the road. I told him that this was just an urban legend and that I would stop and take a photo so he could see that it was just a legend, and that he had been watching a lot of horror movies. He told me I would regret doing that, so we made a bet, $20 if I took a photo on the side of that road. I laughed and said it would be the easiest money I would get from him. I left the company around 6 p.m. That day, especially, was very dark. After an hour, I finally passed the road, but decided to stop on the way back, as I wanted to make the delivery soon. I arrived at the delivery point and, while someone was unloading the product, I spoke to a security guard there. I told him about the bet I made with my boss. For some reason, he also knew this legend and said that it was a real story, that even the elderly knew about it. He said that, if it were him, he wouldn't do this kind of thing, and that messing with the other world can be scary or even something that can change your life forever. I asked him if he really thought a ghost would appear on the side of the road and attack me. He said yes. So I repeated what I had told my boss, that he was watching too many horror movies. I finally got back to the truck and it was time to go home and take the photo. It was already night when I arrived at that road. There was no movement of cars, so I could finally take that photo in peace. I stopped the truck on the side of the road and got out to take the photo that would earn me $20 and prove that that legend didn't exist, that it was just another story to scare children. When I finished taking the photo, I noticed that the truck turned off on its own. I ran to see what had happened, but I had no idea why. I called my boss and he said he would send a mechanic there. When he knew where I was, he advised me not to joke about it. Even if I didn't believe the stories, I shouldn't be unaware. I agreed and lay in the truck, waiting for the mechanic to arrive, which would take a while. I ended up dozing off and woke up to someone knocking on the door. I didn't know how long I had slept, so I thought it was the mechanic. I went to look out the window, but there was no one there. I went down to check around the truck and there really was no one there. I thought I dreamed about those beats. I went back to the truck and turned on the radio, but it started making strange noises, as if they were incomprehensible words. I thought it was because of the area I was in. It was then that I heard a knock on the door again. This time, I saw what was knocking, a deformed man. He was pulling the handle as if he wanted to get in. I was left unresponsive, shaking and not knowing what to do. I regained my composure and checked that both doors were locked. Even though I was scared, I decided to hold the door on my side to prevent him from opening it. I started screaming at that thing to go away, saying I hadn't done anything to him. He stopped trying to open the door and stared at me through the window. He was totally deformed, scary. I knew he wasn't human, as it was impossible to be alive in that condition. He stood as still as a statue, staring at me. There's a small curtain on the truck door windows, so I pulled both of them so I wouldn't have to look at that being. Silence took over the place for a few minutes, until that thing started screaming and banging on the door again. The sound was desperate and I didn't know if I would get out of that situation alive. I was in that hellish situation for some time, until a car passed by and all that noise stopped. After that, nothing was heard again. I listened for any sounds until finally the mechanic my boss had sent arrived. He looked at the truck and said the problem was a lack of gasoline. I countered by saying that it was impossible, as I always fill up before making any delivery and also after each one. He asked for calm, noticing that I was agitated, and put some gasoline in the truck, which started working again. I just said let's get out of there, and we did. When we arrived at the company, my boss was still there. He asked what had happened to the truck door, which was all dented, but when he looked at me, he already knew. According to him, I was pale as if I had seen a ghost and looked terrified. He asked if I had seen that. I told him everything and he believed me, asking me to go to a priest the next day so he could remove all the negative energy of that thing from me. When I got home, I didn't know what to do. I still couldn't believe what had happened and I couldn't sleep, because I was afraid of the dark and of closing my eyes, afraid that that thing would come and get me. I searched the internet about these things and finally, when I managed to fall asleep, I heard someone knocking on my bedroom door. I almost had a heart attack. My heart raced so much that it felt like it was going to come out of my mouth. But then I heard a bark. It was just my dog, who always made noise at the door for me to let him into the room. I managed to sleep, but unfortunately I dreamed about it. When I woke up, I quickly went to find a priest so he could remove that energy, just as my boss had suggested. The message I leave here is, never play with the other world, ever.